The quiet flicker of a worn, oil lamp casts long shadows across the cluttered desk where Samuel sits, hands tightly clasped in prayer. His voice is barely above a whisper, soaked with desperation and hope. Lord, bless this work. Bring prosperity, abundance, peace. Outside, the world moves on, the street lights humming, neighbors' laughter spilling through cracked windows, but inside Samuel's small room, a storm brews. His mind cycles through unpaid bills, missed payments, the stack of unopened envelopes threatening to swallow him whole. The neat prayers, the faith he clings to, feel fragile against the towering chaos of his finances. This is not a new scene. For years, Samuel has lived by the promise that belief alone can unlock doors. He prays earnestly, attends morning services, offers thanks during mealtimes, yet each month seems darker than the last. The promise of prosperity, whispered in sermons and sacred texts, remains just out of reach. The conflict gnaws at his soul, a yearning for breakthrough intertwined with the unsettling awareness that something beneath the surface is unsettled, disordered. It's as if the very foundation on which he dreams to build has been left cracked and unstable. Samuel's story echoes in many hearts. The tension between faith and financial struggle, between hope and disorder, is real and raw. It's a tension that pushes deeper questions into the quiet places where we hide them from daylight. Why do prayers for prosperity sometimes feel ignored? How can someone devoted, disciplined in spirit, remain trapped in a cycle of disorder? And if faith is the pathway to abundance, why must the darkness of chaos intervene so persistently to cloud the journey? Tonight, as Samuel sits alone, wrestling with the disparity between prayer and reality, a quiet revelation begins to unfold, not as a thunderous decree, but as a gentle nudge toward a subtle truth. It's the kind of insight that shakes the common understanding without uprooting hope. Instead, it plants new seeds of clarity. It suggests that before abundance blooms, something essential must come first. A condition more foundational than desire, more critical than the words we whisper in moments of vulnerability. Something that lies in the realm of order, a discipline, a readiness, a restructuring waiting to be embraced. Yet, what does this order look like, especially when the very fabric of daily life feels tangled in complexity? Which part of your personal or financial world is crying out for attention? Is it the pile of overdue debts mounting quietly, the lack of budgeting that leaves months unplanned, the reactive spending that fills gaps with temporary relief but deepens strain, or perhaps the absence of clear goals that leaves the future foggy and uninviting? Each one of these disorders, often masked by noise and distraction, acts as a barrier, sometimes invisible, sometimes glaringly obvious, to the prosperity you sense but cannot grasp. Samuel's gaze drops to a note beneath the lamp, scrawled in his careful hand, "God's order comes before abundance." The simplicity of those words does not diminish their weight. They carry a challenge, a call to look beyond the surface of prayer and belief and to interrogate the actual structure of his inner and external financial life. In that moment, a gathering sense of readiness emerges, an invitation to not only ask for blessings but to prepare a sacred space where blessing can settle deeply and grow. This journey, this quiet unfolding from chaos to order, from whispered prayers to tangible transformation, is not a path anyone sets out on lightly. It requires courage to face where the most stubborn clutter lives. It asks us to dismantle excuses, to pause denial, and to meet our reality with radical honesty and tenderness. It invites us to step out of the patterns that have held us captive, not through sheer willpower alone, but through a spiritually anchored readiness to rebuild. If Samuel's current struggle feels familiar to you, know this: you are not alone. The turbulence in your financial life, the frustration mingled with faith, is a shared human experience, and it may be the opening chapter of a powerful transformation. Somewhere beneath the surface chaos lies a call to reimagine your relationship with money, security, and spiritual trust. This is a story about more than just numbers and budgets. It is an awakening to the deeper rhythms that govern prosperity. As the night stretches on and the city sounds soften into silence, Samuel's prayer shifts, not out of desperation, but into a quiet question: which part of my financial life am I unwilling to face? Where is the order that I must cultivate before I can claim abundance? His prayer breaks open space for something new, a doorway inviting him into a process both sacred and practical, one that could reconcile faith with real-life transformation. The path ahead will not always be easy, it will require patience, reflection, and sometimes discomfort. But it is a journey toward a dimension of life where prosperity is not a fleeting dream, but a lived reality grounded in order and divine timing. For those who dare to look beneath the chaos and into the heart of their financial lives, a profound revelation awaits. As Samuel leans into this moment of quiet surrender, he begins to understand that true abundance does not spring from wishful prayer alone, but from an ordered life, prepared with intention and aligned with the divine. Tonight, with prayer as his compass, Samuel steps toward that reality, the reality you, too, can reach. The question now becomes yours: what part of your financial world feels most disordered today, and what would happen if, instead of praying around it, you chose to bring it into the light of order? Late into the evening, Miriam sat by the faint glow of her kitchen lamp, a stack of unopened bank statements spread before her like a forbidden manuscript. The sharp scent of coffee mingled with the faint rustle of papers as her fingers trembled slightly, not from cold but from an unease she had long ignored. Unlike the loud chaos of a single moment of crisis, Miriam's financial disarray was a slow erosion, a pattern of neglect, avoidance, and subtle confusion woven into years of rushed decisions and hopeful distractions. In that quiet, vulnerable space, she found herself forced to confront a question she had never dared ask: which corner of her finances was truly out of balance, hiding beneath layers of denial and hopeful postponement? She realized it wasn't just the bills or the fluctuating bank balance, it was the entire ecosystem of her financial habits. A tangled maze of subscriptions she hardly used but hadn't cancelled, impulsive purchases masked as rewards, and an absence of a clear vision that left her floating without direction. This wasn't chaos born of circumstance alone, it was disorder fueled by a lack of intentionality. And this discovery sparked something unsettling yet profoundly necessary: the understanding that the state of her financial life mirrored the state of her inner alignment, the way her day-to-day actions either honored or undermined her deeper values. Miriam's story is emblematic of a subtle but critical truth often overlooked: disorder in finances is rarely isolated to numbers on a page. Instead, it manifests in the way decisions are made, or evaded, in the rhythms we embed in daily life. Imagine, for a moment, that your financial life is a vast garden. Neglect one patch, and weeds take root swiftly, choking the seedlings of security and potential growth. Likewise, habits like inconsistent tracking of expenses, habitual overspending as a temporary balm, or failing to communicate openly about money with loved ones all serve as invasive species that silently stifle prosperity before it can take hold. Now, consider how this applies when you face the temptation to cover up mistakes with silence or rationalization. Like Miriam, you may find yourself caught in a cycle where the dominant approach is to hope for change without changing the groundwork. Yet beneath hope without structure lies vulnerability, an unsteady foundation that leaves abundance as a distant dream rather than an achievable horizon. It's a powerful signal: prosperity beckons, but the soil in which it must root requires careful tending and fearless cleansing. Another crucial layer is the emotional barricades surrounding money. Many harbor an unspoken archive of financial shame, guilt, or fear that goes beyond the practical numbers. For Miriam, growing up in a home where money was scarce and conversations about it were cloaked in anxiety meant that her view of wealth was tinged with mistrust. These inherited emotions shaped how she managed, or avoided managing, her finances. This invisible weight often makes order seem inaccessible. It colors every budgeting attempt with internal resistance, and distorts the meaning of financial success as something elusive or even immoral. She began to reveal these hidden immaterial barriers by journaling her feelings alongside her transactions. She penned, "Why do I hesitate to open this envelope? What am I really afraid of?" These prompts, paired with her unfolding awareness of habits, created a pathway toward dismantling the resistance. They offered a mirror to recognize that order is much more than organizing numbers. It's about cultivating honest intimacy with one's financial life at every level: rational, emotional, and spiritual. What if, instead of skipping over discomfort, you leaned into these moments of tension as sacred invitations? Picture a craftsman returning to a weathered piece of wood, patiently sanding away rough spots before applying fresh varnish. Just as the craftsman doesn't rush this process, your journey toward financial order must honor the slow, deliberate work of identifying pockets of chaos. This could mean confronting difficult conversations with partners, setting clear intentions for purposeful spending, or reevaluating the role money plays in your self-worth and faith journey. No small feat emerges overnight. There's a peculiar kind of courage in waking up each day and choosing to face the financial chaos head-on, armed not just with optimism but with rooted practices of accountability and awareness. Miriam's breakthrough arrived not with an earth-shattering event but with a quiet commitment, choosing daily to track expenses diligently, communicate honestly with her family, and gently dismantle the fearful narratives she had clung to for years. This was not a linear march but a dance, where missteps occurred without judgment, and progress revealed itself in small, consistent acts of care. By approaching disorder as a multifaceted barrier, one that incorporates habits, emotions, and beliefs, you start shifting the lens from frustration to empowerment. You gain access to a map that guides you toward making intentional changes, where each correction adds a plank to the bridge leading out of chaos. Financial stewardship becomes less about sacrifice alone and more about reclaiming harmony between values and actions, unlocking a freedom that prayer alone cannot grant but prayer always welcomes. Indeed, as Miriam leaned into that delicate balance, tending the neglected garden with newfound respect, she began to glimpse a different horizon. One where abundance was less a distant plea and more the inevitable flowering from a bed thoroughly prepared, loved, and ordered. This nuanced recognition, that prosperity demands order in forms both seen and unseen, invites you to take stock, right now, which area of your financial life quietly demands this honest reckoning. Where's the waiting space that, if occupied with intentional care, could become the foundation for your own unfolding abundance? Late one afternoon, as the golden sun dipped behind the city skyline, Jacob sat cross-legged on the bare floor of his cramped apartment, surrounded by a swarm of open notebooks, receipts, and bank alerts glaring from his phone screen. Every page told a fragment of a story he hadn't dared to piece together fully until that moment. It wasn't just about numbers misaligned or accounts unpaid, it was the fragmented reality of inconsistency laced throughout his financial existence. Unlike before, where avoidance disguised itself as hope, this evening Jacob felt something else stirring, a growing willingness to confront a deeper truth, the invisible currents shaping how he engaged with his resources, choices, and even his identity. Jacob's breakthrough began when he recognized that disorder didn't merely exist in external chaos, it rooted itself in the disconnect between his intentions and the narratives he told himself about money. These self-created stories acted as invisible fences, confining him in repetitive cycles of short-term fixes and reactive survival. For example, he believed that having just enough was a virtue, a testament to humility, which paradoxically sabotaged his ability to pursue stability. This mindset tethered him to scarcity thinking so tightly that opportunities for growth were dismissed as either unrealistic or dangerously optimistic. The sheer weight of this invisible dogma left him drained, constantly cycling between anxious budgeting and spontaneous splurges seeking relief. As twilight settled, Jacob pulled out an old journal and wrote, "How have I let self-imposed limits shape the way I steward what I have?" This question cracked open a new door, not merely a ledger of dollars and cents, but a map to the stories that framed his financial reality. It dawned on him that financial order was inevitably linked to reshaping these internal narratives, that real transformation required dismantling not only external clutter but also the restrictive beliefs and emotional habits lurking beneath the surface. Consider, for a moment, how pervasive ingrained attitudes about money can be, a silent undertow pulling us beneath waves of doubt or surrender. Just as tangled roots can choke a towering tree, these patterns choke potential, carving deep grooves of resignation or fear. Sometimes, people treat money like a forbidden topic, an emotional powder keg avoided in family conversations or personal reflection. Jacob discovered, through unmasking his own stories, that such silence amplifies disorder by eroding clarity and reinforcing isolation. The act of naming these stories aloud, even if initially uncomfortable, began to untangle the knots binding him to disarray. True, confronting internal dialogue isn't a one-time event but a continuous unveiling. Jacob chose to ritualize this by dedicating early mornings to intentional reflection, allowing himself to explore feelings like shame over past mistakes or guilt tied to money's perceived moral weight. This practice gradually transformed from an academic exercise into a sacred space of self-compassion and radical honesty. More than this, it shifted his relationship from adversarial to collaborative, turning money from a source of stress into a mirror reflecting his evolving self-awareness. Another dimension Jacob encountered was the role of boundaries, in relationships, spending, and decision-making. Until now, blurred limits had contributed to reactive financial habits. For instance, urgent texts from family asking for help prompted impulsive lending, which, without clear boundaries or soil fertile in intentional communication, created tension and deeper chaos within his financial ecosystem. Recognizing this, Jacob began to script honest conversations about money that balanced generosity with sustainability, delineating what he could realistically support while honoring his own needs. This boundary setting was not cold or selfish, it was a vital act of integrity fostering clearer, healthier interactions that supported order rather than chaos. In these moments, Jacob understood that cultivating order required a subtle, layered dance between embracing vulnerability and asserting deliberate structure. The metaphor of tuning a musical instrument comes to mind: too tight, and the strings snap; too loose, and the melody falters. His financial life demanded this nuanced tuning, adjusting habits and beliefs with care so that harmony could emerge. The beauty of this process was that it wasn't punitive; instead, it invited grace and curiosity to flourish within discipline. Imagine how liberating it becomes when one can shift from reacting to cultivating, from feeling trapped to creating, not just in money management but in how you relate to what money represents. Jacob's evolving story illuminated this shift, showing that financial order first blossoms by plumbing the depths of internal alignment. And where this begins, within the stories you inherit and the conversations you choose, can change everything. It transforms prayer from a plea for change into a partnership with your deeply rooted readiness to receive it. Jacob's journey had reached a new threshold. In a softly lit room filled with notes of affirmation, a calendar marking mindful spending days, and a renewed sense of agency, he recognized that what once seemed like chaos was the raw material for a resplendent reordering. As he closed his journal, a quiet promise whispered within him: this is not the end but the vital turning, the moment where the whisper of order begins to orchestrate the symphony of abundance he seeks. With this awareness, the walls erected by unspoken fears start to crumble, making space for intentional action, accountability, and a hope deeply rooted in purposeful growth. On a cool spring evening, Ava found herself lingering in the soft hum of her living room, a steaming cup of herbal tea cradled between her hands. The world outside felt distant, but inside, a tempest stirred. Unlike previous moments filled with frantic scrambling or dashed hopes, this time was different. It was charged with a tentative openness to explore a side of her financial life she had always skirted around, the emotional undercurrents that dictated her spending and saving choices. Ava's story wasn't one of dramatic upheaval. Instead, it was the subtle sway of feelings, unspoken frustrations, unacknowledged fears, and invisible yearnings, that had quietly sculpted the contours of her financial reality. Her awakening began not with numbers or plans but with a single phrase caught in a late-night journal entry: "Where does my heart wander when money feels scarce?" This subtle interrogation unearthed memories soaked in vulnerability, childhood dinners where silence around bills created a cavern of anxiety, friendships where talking about money felt taboo, moments where impulsive purchases briefly filled emotional voids. These recollections weren't just nostalgic, they were keys unlocking an emotional ledger tied to her wallet's openness or resistance. Consider a painter confronted with a blank canvas. Before the first brushstroke, the artist must engage deeply with the vision stirring within, the feelings and stories that will shape the colors and textures. Similarly, Ava grasped that financial order could never take root without first acknowledging the emotional landscape beneath. Money, she realized, is less a mere instrument and more a messenger carrying stories of worth, security, and belonging. The untended garden of feelings, if left ignored, fosters uneven growth, thriving in some places but barren in others. This insight drew Ava deeper into the terrain of emotional wisdom. One evening, during a quiet moment beside her window, she rehearsed a conversation she'd long avoided, admitting to herself and her closest confidant that fear, not laziness or lack of discipline, had often steered her financial decisions. Her voice trembled as she confided, "I spend not just because I want things, but because I want to forget." Such a declaration shattered the invisible wall between denial and healing. The admission became a soft turning point, where vulnerability replaced judgment with possibility. Transforming awareness into action demanded more than acknowledgement, it called for cultivating new emotional habits. To nurture this, Ava designed a nightly ritual, a pause before sleep where she would breathe deeply, mapping feelings tied to the day's financial choices without blame. She began tuning into the subtle signals her body sent when tempted to overspend, a racing heart or clenched jaw, seeing them as clues rather than obstacles. Over time, this gentle practice built a bridge between inner turmoil and conscious decision-making, allowing her to name emotional triggers and choose responses aligned with her values instead of hidden anxieties. Yet, the journey had another dimension, the presence of societal and familial myths woven into Ava's financial psyche. Stories that equated success with material excess, or conversely, framed money as inherently corrupting, had created conflicting messages inside her. Scrubbing free of these pervasive narratives felt like peeling layers of paint from a weathered door, each layer revealing new areas needing attention and compassion. Rather than reject her upbringing or resent cultural expectations, Ava sought to understand how these inherited beliefs shaped her money mindset, often more powerfully than external circumstances. One afternoon, Ava sat across from her sister, a trusted sounding board, and shared her evolving reflections. "It's strange," she mused, "how the stories stitched into my childhood still whisper instructions I don't always agree with, but which I follow without realizing." Her sister nodded, acknowledging the invisible threads each family weaves, coloring how we grasp abundance or scarcity. This shared dialogue fortified Ava's resolve to consciously rewrite those scripts, not by erasing her past but by integrating awareness and new perspectives that serve her present and future. Parallel to internal work, Ava explored how emotional clarity influenced her daily financial routines. She noticed that reconnecting with her feelings reduced the compulsion to reward herself with spontaneous purchases after stressful days. Instead, she experimented with acts of self-care detached from money, a walk in the fresh air, a heartfelt conversation, or journaling, finding these nurtured the emptiness money had masqueraded to fill. Consequently, her budget began blooming with purpose rather than punishment, integrating both practical goals and emotional health. In the midst of this unfolding story, Ava came to a pivotal realization: emotional mastery isn't about rigid control or suppression but about becoming fluent in the language of her inner world. Just as a skilled dancer listens to every note and nuance, responding with grace and agility, she learned to interpret the whispers of her heart and mind, harmonizing financial decisions with genuine needs and aspirations. This fluidity relieved the grip of chaos, replacing frantic uncertainty with a poised readiness rooted in empathy for herself. At its core, Ava's experience invites a profound question to anyone grappling with financial disorder: what emotions lie hidden beneath spending patterns, avoidance, or impulsivity? How might inviting curiosity and kindness into those feelings reshape your financial journey? This is not a call to fix emotions overnight but rather to forge a tender relationship with them, one that informs your money choices with clarity instead of confusion, order instead of overwhelm. In doing so, the fertile ground for genuine prosperity begins to reveal itself, not as an abstract dream but as a lived experience enriched by emotional wisdom. In the quiet spaces between heartbeats, beneath the surface of restless thoughts, there lies a current, a subtle movement that carries the weight of untold stories and unspoken truths. Imagine standing on a shoreline, the tide ebbing and flowing with a rhythm that at first seems arbitrary, chaotic even, but gradually reveals a pattern forged by forces both visible and unseen. Just as the sea shapes the sands with deliberate persistence, so too do the threads woven through your experience begin to draw a tapestry of meaning, revealing the contours of a transformation not yet fully spoken but deeply felt. You find yourself somewhere between the tension of what has been and the beckoning of what might be, a liminal space where questions hover, restless and probing. It is here that the disparate whispers coalesce into an invisible architecture, a framework that holds the possibilities of renewal and growth. The journey so far has invited you not simply to glance at the surface of your circumstances but to delve beneath, embracing the paradox of faith wrestling with reality, hope entangled with hesitation. Within that complex interplay, there emerges an awareness that the path forward is neither a race nor a leap, but a steady unfolding, a careful orchestration where intention must meet authenticity. Reflecting on this journey so far, you might notice how the winds of transformation do not sweep in with brazen force but as a patient invitation, a coaxing to examine the soil before planting the seeds of abundance. It's as if a master gardener beckons you to tend a neglected plot, to acknowledge the stubborn roots of resistance and the stubborn debris of old patterns satisfied to linger in shadow. You see now that order is not merely a checklist or a rigid structure imposed from without, it is a sanctuary cultivated within, a harmony born from alignment between what you desire and the care you bring to its foundation. There is a quiet gravity in recognizing that readiness is a silent partner in the dance toward flourishing. Like a musician tuning their instrument before a performance, the subtle adjustments made in moments of stillness are the prelude to the symphony yet to come. Your inner landscape, with all its complexities and contradictions, demands this vigilant tuning. It resists the temptation to be hurried or forced into premature resolution. Instead, it beckons you to honor the process as sacred, knowing that each deliberate step establishes a cadence of confidence and resilience. You might hear, too, the gentle murmur of patience weaving through your contemplation, a reminder that transformation need not be urgent to be profound. This patience does not suggest passivity, rather, it embodies a fierce, loving attentiveness to the present moment's lessons. It coaxingly asks you to surrender the rush to fix everything at once and instead offers the freedom found in committed, consistent nurturing of what truly matters. Through this lens, the wild stirrings of chaos are gently tamed, not by control or denial but by the tender practice of unfolding clarity. In the depths of this stillness, there is a dawning realization: the intricate dance between order and abundance mirrors the fluidity of nature itself. Just as a river carves its path over time, through persistence and gentle yielding, your journey moves with a similar grace, sometimes surging forward, at times meandering amid challenges, always shaping the landscape of your life. This flow invites you to step into the role of both witness and participant, embracing the tension between the known and the unknown, the seen and the intangible. As you stand at this threshold, a delicate tension vibrates beneath your skin, the palpable space between what you have uncovered and what lies just beyond reach. It is an invitation brimming with quiet urgency, beckoning you to engage with a deeper current of purpose waiting to be awakened. The accumulation of insights gathered is neither weight nor burden but the fertile earth from which new life can spring. Within this convergence lies fertile ground primed for a transformation that honors the fullness of your experience. You may find yourself wondering how the unseen threads interlace so seamlessly, how the willingness to face vulnerability, the readiness to challenge old narratives, and the commitment to foster new rhythms converge into a single movement forward. It is here, in this moment pregnant with possibility, that the intricate symphony begins to take shape, promising not only change but a profound redefinition of what prosperity means for you. The horizon ahead glimmers with the quiet certainty that before abundance fully dawns, there is an artful patience required, an openness to prepare, tend, and align. Inhabit this space with the same reverence as a craftsman examining raw materials before unveiling their artistry. Feel the tension of the loom's threads pulling taut, anticipating the emergence of a design both deliberate and inspired. Let your breath slow and your awareness deepen, sensing the subtle weave of faith, intention, and discernment intertwining within. This is the moment where understanding gathers momentum, a living energy ready to propel you into what comes next. And so you stand, neither overwhelmed by complexity nor seduced by promises of instant transformation, but grounded in the knowing that the journey itself infuses meaning into the destination. The invitation is clear: to lean further into this sacred process, to trust the unfolding, and to meet the next step with courage shaped by insight. The path ahead is illuminated not merely by what you hope to receive but by the order you diligently embrace within. Even as the night settled more deeply, a soft breeze drifted through the cracked window, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine and the distant hum of life beyond. Maya sat quietly in her worn armchair, fingers traced lightly along the edges of a weathered ledger that had seen better days. The pages bore the marks of hurried notes, crossed-out figures, and tentative plans, but tonight, those ink-stained sheets symbolized much more than mere numbers. They held a journey, though unfinished, woven from courage and newfound clarity. She spoke softly into the emptiness, as if sharing a secret with the room itself. I've chased blessings without readying the ground to receive them. Now, I see that abundance doesn't arrive as a gift, it grows where order has been lovingly planted. Her words hung like a prayer between shadows cast by the flickering candlelight. For years, she had wrestled with the puzzle, the fervent prayers for prosperity paired with the persistent tangle of financial instability. Each plea felt like a thread pulling at hope, but the fabric remained torn, ragged at its edges. It was the silent ache she bore beneath smiles, the quiet battles against worry that sleepless nights witnessed. Tonight, however, that ache had transformed, taking on the weight of understanding. Prosperity, she realized, does not spring from longing alone, it is born from the patient artistry of healing the spaces where chaos resides, the overlooked corners, the unspoken truths, the habits hidden under the guise of survival. Maya's reflection flickered like a flame against the darkness, illuminating a profound truth that reaches far beyond the ledgers of any one life. True abundance demands a sacred kind of arrival, one that is crafted with intention and tender discipline. It is not the sudden flood but the steady river, shaping its own path through perseverance and care. She thought about the countless mornings when she awoke weighed by scattered plans and restless doubts, and how she had mistaken fervor for readiness. It became clear that desire alone is like a seed tossed onto barren earth, it needs soil, prepared, nurtured, and embraced before the roots can take hold and reach deep. The unfolding of this insight was more than a pivot in perspective, it was a gateway to gentler self-truths and greater inner harmony. Maya understood that the collection of small, intentional acts, each choice to bring light into disorder, to name hidden fears, to set boundaries born from self-respect, composed the rhythm of transformation. This rhythm carried its own wisdom, that healing does not scorn imperfections but gathers them with grace, weaving broken threads into a tapestry richer and more resilient than before. As dawn whispered on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of rose and amber, Maya rose from her chair, the ledger tucked safely beneath her arm. Outside, the world budded with possibility, untamed yet promising. She stepped softly into the morning air, the scent of jasmine still lingering near. With every breath, she embraced the subtle power held in this moment, not the end of struggle but the beginning of a different encounter with it. Where once chaos seemed an unstoppable tide, now order beckoned as an invitation, a sacred call to tend life's garden with thoughtful hands. This moment was not about perfection or instant victory but about honoring the unfolding journey itself. Maya held close the understanding that prosperity's true path wins through the heart's willingness to be both vulnerable and relentless, to see where patterns bind and then patiently unravel them. It requires the bravery to face discomfort without retreat and the compassion to celebrate each step forward, no matter how small. As she breathed in the cool morning, a quiet refrain echoed within, abundance is not simply what we seek to claim from the world, it is what we learn to nurture within ourselves, through order, through courage, through grace. And so, the story lingers, breathing in the spaces between heartbeats like a promise whispered just beyond sight. For anyone listening, anyone standing at the edge of their own chaos, the call remains, look closely where your disorder gathers dust and shadow. Face it with honesty and tenderness. Prepare that sacred space because it is here, in this readiness, that the seeds of true abundance find fertile ground to grow. The journey invites you not merely to pray for abundance but to become its steward, patient, mindful, whole. In that stewardship lies the quiet power to transform longing into living grace, chaos into harmony, and prayer into a beautiful, unfolding reality.